As you know, some of my videos have broached the topic of artificial reproduction, the artificial womb, and things like that. Some others have talked about things like sex bots and things of that nature. And I don't really want to talk about those topics today, but I do want to explain the psychology behind why those topics are generally ridiculed. Now, this is a topic of merit, just like any other topic. It's a topic that should be broached and investigated and answered, without some kind of giggly little reversion back to high school, where really it's, the ridicule that comes along with discussing these topics boils down to some kind of immature high school mating strategy. And I want to discuss that, and I want to discuss the psychology behind it. And the reason I want to do that is of course for introspection, but also because frankly, I'm getting a bit sick and tired of people in the manosphere that claim to be about men choosing their own path and doing their own thing, but are really about, when you look deeper into their motivations, continuing to keep men shackled to what women want of them. Specifically by engaging in attempts to ridicule men that are engaging in non-female sanctioned behaviors, particularly in discussion of things like futurology with respect to the upcoming sexual revolution men are slated for in a post-male pill reality. Now, before I address that, if you'll notice, I'm going to use the example of video games because it's a much more current example of why this dynamic exists, why this psychology is expressed specifically in the men's movement. Keep in mind that you have a large population of men in this movement that really want to claim and put a facade up of not caring what women think about them and being free to say and do whatever it is they please. But there still are a lot of men, specifically in tradcon circles, that are absolutely straining their words and their opinions and what they put out there through a sieve of female approval, if you will. They're just doing it in a lot more sneaky, behind the scenes way. But you can see it if you read between the lines of their rhetoric. You can discern it for yourself. So I'm going to start out talking about video games. And, if you'll notice, a lot of these people, they make fun of things like video games with the same real basic template. First, let's just talk about Comic-Con and E3. Now, with the emergence of things like Comic-Con and E3, that, in my opinion, have undeniably pushed video games and comic book culture further into the mainstream than ever before. I'm sure, and I mean I'm 100% convinced that studies could be done following Google Trends and Twitter Trends or whatever, that less and less of these men in particular are starting to ridicule other men who play video games, and less men are calling these modes of entertainment, dangerous escapism, and less of these men are ridiculing it on the whole, as women have loosened their social marginalization of it. And I notice this behavior in a specific brand of individual we find sometimes cropping up in the manosphere. And this individual seems to kind of blend elements of traditionalism and PUA rhetoric, and you see this generally with tradcons on the whole. They love to harken back to an age when, men were still men. I call them the great hearkeners of bygone times, the worshippers of some gilded age that never actually happened. But again, they love harkening back to a time where men were still happy to wake up at the crack of dawn, and they still worked hard, and they love to brag about how hard they work as though it's some virtue. And they neglect to say, of course, that they're boss. And yes, these people are mostly employed as opposed to being employers, these people, and there's a good reason for that. Because, of course, any people that structure their lives around, the satiation of the female-approved masculinity really won't get far in life in terms of creative thinking, the type of creative thinking that would lead you perhaps to starting up your own business. It's not innovative, it's defaultive, it's the traditional protector-provider masculine role that goes into work day in, day out. And so again, these people are mostly employed as opposed to employers. And their boss, of course, he knows that working hard kind of sucks. And so he worked hard just long enough to get himself out of having to, and would rather let these suckers do the hard work for him. But, these guys, they harken back to their time before time when men were still men, and they prop up their aversion to any kind of change in masculinity as some type of selling point and mating strategy to women as a whole. And that's why they hate video games, and that's why they hate things like hip hop. That's why they hate the younger generation of men and their higher potential. Their higher potential to identify their way of life, their old school Marlboro Man bullshit, as a lie and a costly and draining and soul-sucking scam. And that's why I'm proud. I'm proud of the fact that, what was it, over 2 years ago in my video, Flawed Male Desire Leads to Traditional Parasitism, I said loudly and clearly that, this traditionalist setup is pesticide on the male soul. That's why these people resent MGTOW, who are just an expression of male consciousness independent of women and the men women control. And that's an important distinction for you to remember. But these people hate us because we're discovering in our teens and our 20s and our 30s what they've discovered the hard way in their 40s and 50s and 60s. And they're so invested in the lie. They're so invested in that lie of masculinity that women reinforce relentlessly. They're so invested in it that instead of being happy for their younger, freer, more enlightened men and boys that are coming after them, they want to shame us for having the brains and the balls to call their bullshit bullshit. So they attack our free-spiritedness. They attack our easygoing, relaxed, stress-free way of life because they can't stand to see others escaping their stress-filled, overtime-filled drudgery when they had to endure it. So they insist on trying to bash us for the choices we make. So if we play video games, they differentiate themselves to women by saying, well, a real man, well, he plays sports or some other bullshit like that. And to be clear, I love sports. I hate watching them, but I love playing them. And I love playing basketball, and I love playing football. I don't really like baseball too much, but, soccer and hockey's kind of fun, even though I suck at those sports. But I'll play pretty much anything so long as I'm actually participating. And what I want to emphasize here is that these people, these TradCon PUA hybrid types, they love to brag about how they're so knowledgeable in their prepackaged, socially acceptable female masculinity checklist approved mode of entertainment, and how, others are losers because they play the neckbeard hobby, the evil vagina repelling video game. And so it basically just boils down to, well, look at us. We don't play video games. We're real Marlboro men, so pay attention to us and look at us, and it's pretty pathetic, actually. But to put it in perspective, what these people do is that they sit there and they watch a bunch of other men that are physically and financially and socially their superiors toss around a ball for sums of money they could only dream of making. And then they have the nerve to accuse those of us who play video games as participating in escapism. That we're just trying to shut off the world or some other bullshit. And to that I respond, well, who really is participating in escapism here? I can say that in playing video games, I've gone to nationwide tournaments with hundreds of participants in a single venue. I've been to tournaments throughout New York, some in the Javits Center in Manhattan, where, I met interesting, like-minded people. I've made, it's got to be thousands of dollars now, profit from video game tournaments throughout my life, all doing something I enjoy. I've made friends. All I've ever done watching a sports game really is to sit in front of a TV and watch other people make money. And that's it. And I can honestly say that playing video games has afforded me more social enjoyment, more financial opportunity, and more opportunities to travel than watching a sports game on TV ever has. And we forget to mention the one thing that differentiates watching sports from playing video games, and that is the operative verb of playing versus watching. One is an active participant when playing a video game. One is an inactive participant when watching a sports game. You see, these people, they lack an understanding of how video games are morphing into the predecessor of a revolution in the way we perceive the world. Video games, in my opinion, are the predecessors of a virtual world that is not an escape from reality, but an expansion into it. And I'll give you an example of how this works. Now, I've talked about a game like Minecraft before, and this is a game where you do nothing, really, other than to place voxels of cubes in whatever configuration you can think of. So in essence, you build something completely virtual with no immediately apparent result in our real physical reality. Except that these arrangements of voxels have now reached a level of complexity that have built scale models of cities of both the real and mythical variety. So you have scale models built of New York, with Central Park and Manhattan and all of its tourist attractions and the like, and you have scale models built of mythical cities in Game of Thrones or in Skyrim or whatever. And some of these creations require, a knowledge, a pretty in-depth knowledge of multivariable calculus and electronic circuitry for the redstone and the like, and logic gates and all that. And in fact, there's an interesting article that I put in the description box explaining how engineering agencies are now holding a Minecraft fair to attract prospective engineers based on the complexity of the designs they can achieve in Minecraft. So the mental focus and creativity required to build vast, intricate structures in Minecraft are so similar to the qualities that it takes to be a successful engineer that engineering agencies in real life are starting to look at creations of a virtual world, a completely fictional world in Minecraft, to recruit people to help them build things in the real world. So to the great hearkeners, the sneaky little half PUA, half social conservative people trying to insinuate themselves, particularly into MGTOW, all you're really doing, and the way you talk and what you talk about demonstrates it to me, all you're really doing is using MGTOW's popularity to try to kick game, and it's pretty pathetic, to online manosphere female groupies. It's disgusting. You want to use MGTOW and harkening back to your Marlboro Man bullshit to try to put down other men. And the reason why it doesn't work is because MGTOW came into being specifically because they're sick of society, that is women, and men like you who are controlled by women telling us what's manly or whatever, or in other words, socially acceptable to talk about. So, for example, if MGTOW want to make a video, or anybody wants to make a video talking about artificial wombs one day, and just because, you could talk about it or don't talk about it along with us, but, just do us a favor and keep your smug, sideways little comments that amount to nothing more than a feeble little online YouTube mating strategy to yourself. If I ever make a video or a comment regarding what a sex doll might possibly mean 50 years from now in terms of the ramifications it will have on the expression of male sexuality, then, do me a favor and just spare me the, ooh, look, women, he talks about sex dolls because he can't get laid spiel, because it's old and it's tired and frankly it's stupid. I talk about these things for the same reason I talk in other videos about 3D printable guns being a vehicle for maintaining freedom and a threat to statist regimes in the future. It's because I enjoy pontificating on how the future of our species will unfold in both our near and distant futures. And your argument really is as ridiculous as saying that I imagine 3D printable guns in the future because I can't cope or deal with a reality where the state has a much higher degree of control over the sale and manufacture of firearms without 3D printing. I'm a futurist, and as such, I sometimes speculate on how sexual dynamics will be affected by products that are as of yet not on the market. Vibrators were used in the 1930s to treat female hysteria, and at this point, very few women and even very few men had ever even heard of a vibrator. And I'm sure many women and even some men speculated that this technology would revolutionize how human beings, specifically the human female, has sex. And 70 years later, with vibrator sales through the roof, the highest they've ever been, do you see any of these people ridiculing women for using what's essentially a robotic male member to simulate a man's penis with? No, you don't. These same people that will ridicule a man for even daring to mention any possible method of solo sexual stimulation for men ridicule that, but they wouldn't dare, and I mean they would not dare attempt to ridicule the fact that women have been doing just that for over half a century. Because then here's the core of it all. They are controlled by pussy. They depend on pussy, and they hate men that don't depend on pussy and actively try to control our desire for it by any means we're comfortable with. So yeah, if I want to talk about how eventually one day some Japanese roboticist will break the barrier that needs to be surpassed, where some human sex doll goes from the point of creepy, lifeless, jittery doll to a passable human replica with passable mannerisms and gestures and the like, then yeah, I'm going to talk about it. And if you don't like listening to it, then, well, maybe this isn't the channel for you. Unsubscribe. And you know what? Maybe in this video I'll do just that. Maybe just because I feel like it, I'll talk about what it will actually take to make a realistic sex toy in the shape of the female form that men would actually want to utilize for sexual pleasure on a large scale. Just because I feel like it. But first, to illustrate what I'm talking about here, let's talk about an article from PUA Roissy, or Chateau Artiste, or however you pronounce his name, titled simply Sex Bots, where he chooses to address, the possible ramifications of such an invention. And that article is in the description box if you want to read it yourself. And clearly, if you do read it, you'll see that this is really the same kind of rhetoric that MGTOW have often speculated on, 50 or 100 years into the future. That is, if this technology existed, what would the effects on male human sexuality be? Of course, PUAs like Roissy, they aren't accused of hating women or escapism or any of the other generic insults that come along when MGTOW mention these things. And why? Well, because women know that PUAs are reliable vagina slaves. Women see the depths to which PUAs will degrade themselves to get a whiff of the vaginal ambrosia, and they know they aren't going anywhere. They're sitting right on that plantation, right where they belong, the good little boys that they are. And it's no coincidence that both feminists and the usual suspect tradcons, they both, in the wake of the Elliot Rodgers shooting, they both tried to link MGTOW to potential violence after the Elliot Rodgers shooting. Not to PUAs, but to MGTOW. And Elliot Rodgers, of course, he repeatedly said that he would like to kill men for the crime of having women like them instead of him. MGTOW don't talk about killing men, and MGTOW don't talk about forcing women to like us either. Now, what MGTOW do you know who says these things is simply unheard of. We're all about non-violently doing our own thing. It was Elliot Rodgers himself who dabbled in the world of PUA. It was Elliot Rodgers himself who never ever mentioned MGTOW in his entire manifesto or in any of his forum posts or in any of his videos. And with all that said, you know what, even still, I don't blame PUAs for what Elliot Rodgers did. But surely if he's going to be linked to any group in the manosphere, certainly the last choice I would make is MGTOW, by far, by a long shot. Now, in a previous video, I linked to a video called Why Are Things Creepy? That talks about the concept of the uncanny valley. And I think that the uncanny valley is the most important hurdle to pass before machines that realistically emulate human actions and physical mannerisms are constructed. Now, we have no problem with creating a realistic mask of a human face with convincing enough eyes and lips and facial structure. But I think the problem lies in correctly emulating the movements of the human face and body. So I'm talking about an understanding of human facial kinesiology that is able to fool a human observer to the point that it's indistinguishable from a real human. And this is where the concept of the uncanny valley comes in. Now first, let me explain the uncanny valley used in this PDF, which is a PDF of the writings of the inventor, or the coiner of the phrase, a Japanese roboticist. His name escapes me right now, but it's in the PDF. But first, I'm going to use an example in that PDF to kind of explain what the uncanny valley is in my own words. Now, through your travels, you've surely come across a person, most likely someone you don't know, a stranger, who is wearing a prosthetic limb, perhaps, his hand. And these prosthetic devices, they've advanced to such a degree that from afar, or when you're not paying attention, they can certainly pass as a flesh and blood human hand. And it's only when you get closer upon further inspection that you actually realize, oh, well, this guy is missing his hand and he's wearing a prosthetic device. And in that instant, when that realization dawns on you, for a second, you may have been overcome, if you're being honest about it, and I hate to say this, but it's true, you may have been overcome with an almost imperceptible, and it's imperceptible because we automatically push these feelings down into our subconscious, but an almost imperceptible feeling of revulsion or fear or disgust at this person's prosthetic hand, and this feeling may only last a split second. But something in our lizard brain tells us, get that thing away from me. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to see it. Keep it away. Before our higher rational brain takes over and tells us that there's nothing wrong with having a prosthetic device and this person isn't a threat. But on some level, imitations of human actions and mannerisms that are initially hard to discern and just a little bit off, but are there nonetheless, under the surface, that terrifies us. And that's what fuels the uncanny valley. The idea that as things that impersonate humans become more human-like, there are two phases of human interpretation and reaction to this stimulus that we generally go through. The first phase is a reaction to the cute and kind of humanoid, but not human, distinctly robot. And these are things like R2-D2. This is Gertie from the movie Moon. This is all those cute robots from the Disney and Pixar movies. And these robots are non-threatening to us because we know just by looking at them on initial first inspection that they aren't human. We aren't being tricked, and as such we're comfortable enough regarding them in an endearing way. But as we get closer to accurately mimicking human movement and mannerisms, as we get closer to mimicking the facial minutiae, that the muscles in our face create when expressing a wide range of human emotions. And when we train robots to attempt to recreate the undulating, controlled fall that is human walking or running effectively, we start to approach the point where we're close to impersonating these movements and mannerisms flawlessly, but we're just a little off. And that is what terrifies the shit out of us. To see the kinks being worked out on a robot that's just not quite there yet, but really close to emulating human movement and nonverbal communication. That makes us scared. That makes us uneasy. And you can see this progression through the uncanny valley in the progression of CGI animated sequences from 10 years ago in comparison with those of the present. Now, if we look at the movie Polar Express, which attempts to emulate human movement this way in 2004, what we see are human impersonations that are, they're close, but they're just not close enough that we don't notice that something's just off. In an article I read that's included in the description box, it described these CGI rendered humans as kind of corpse-like. And if you watch the trailer to the movie in the description box, you can see that they move unnaturally, they move jittery, and they look and feel almost as if a virtual human skin has been placed over a robot skeleton who has rules of movement and algorithms, computer-generated algorithms that attempt to imitate but never actually recreate human movement. And now in 2014, if you look at the excellent rendering of the late Audrey Hepburn in Galaxy's chocolate commercial, you see a significant difference in the realism and the fluidity of movement of Hepburn in comparison to her Polar Express predecessors. And this goes to show that, yes, as humans, we are progressing in decoding our own facial minutiae, and yes, we are interested in this. There's another interesting article included where we're developing robots that mimic the human gaze, and the scientists developing these robots are trying to master not just the appropriate times to achieve eye contact, but just important in creating a fluid, realistic looking robotic conversation with another human being. Just important for achieving that is look aversion, when to look away. So body language cues that human beings pick up on, right? That we think is something that can never be reproduced, that is uniquely human, but in fact, there absolutely is mathematical formulas that can say, when we blink, when we avert our gaze, when we make eye contact, the slight imperceptible movements, pupil dilation, all of these things can be measured mathematically and implemented into an algorithm that will effectively, perfectly recreate the human experience, the human conversation, human eye contact, and the like. And so, again, yes, we are interested in this. Just as we're interested in anything that tells us more about ourselves, and yes, we will, in the not-so-distant future, surpass the uncanny valley. And yes, at that point in time, someone's going to use that to make a realistic sex doll, and it's going to open up a floodgate of sexual confusion and exploration and satisfaction, the likes of which have never been seen before. And it's interesting to talk about it. But of course, women say you're a loser if you talk about it, so I guess we should just go back to talking about sports. I don't know, Derek Jeter did something last night, and get me a Heineken while you're at it, because that's what real men drink, right? No, I don't accept that. Real men, if you want to know, in my opinion, what a real man is, real men have vision. Real men crave seeing the unseen. Real men embark on a quest of discovery that lasts their whole lifetime. And real men don't give a damn what society expects of them. And it's this vision that has made men, in terms of what they've given to the human species, it's this vision that has made us the shining ornament of humanity. And it's absolutely essential that we preserve and cultivate this tendency for men and boys to embrace forward-looking vision as much as we can, and we certainly do not do that by placing them in their rigid, restraining, stifling protector-provider roles as soon as they start watching their first Disney movies and see Prince Aladdin or whoever providing for Jasmine or whatever. This male vision, it's so powerful that it's the closest thing, in my opinion, that the human species has that can be compared to prescience. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. But I think that the day we stamp out that instinct that men have to wonder and to adventure and to look forward into the future and visualize realities that are greater and grander than ours, but are yet to come, That's the beginning of the end of these ambitious little intelligent hairless apes that display so much potential, along with so much primitive base biological slavery as well. Well, that's all I really have to say about that for the moment, but expect a lot more content. I'm going to try to bust out a lot of videos in these next couple of days, 4th of July weekend, so got a lot of time in my hands. And I was able to finally fix the issue that was going on with my PayPal link, so if you like this kind of content, feel free to contribute. If not, that's fine too, but if you like this and you want to support it, the PayPal link is now working. So that's all I have to say for now, and I'm getting started on this next video. Thanks for listening.